Bill Bailey, welcome to Between Two Beers.
It's Bill Bailey!
That's a very cool thing to say. This is the 9th tour to New Zealand.
Yeah.
Would you move here?
I've considered it on a number of occasions.
What does a successful year look like for you now?
If I learn a new instrument, I would consider that to be a success.
Pause there for a second and try and get a genuine number on the amount of instruments you know how to play.
I mean, somebody did figure out that it was, I don't know, between 60 and 100.
Sean Locke may have been the funniest man to have ever lived.
He had this ability to just turn a story on its head, take a subject and sort of go with him. Where the hell are we going with this? It was a huge gap in my life. It's a huge hole. It's difficult, really, because we were so close for so long, and I hadn't really thought about what would happen when he wasn't there. My dad lives next door now. That, to me, is precious time. He's not your average 93-year-old. For most of his childhood was the war, and having that actually as a sort of almost like a living repository of memory like that is a wonderful thing.
I'm having a moment because my dad would have been 91. Such a special thing for you to still be able to hear them, and for your own son to be able to hear them as well is amazing. This week on Between Two Beers, we talk to Bill Bailey.
Bill is an international comedy legend. He's best known for his work on TV shows like Black Books, QI, and Never Mind the Buzzcocks. He's authored 3 best-selling books. He won Strictly Come Dancing in 2020, is a classically trained in music, has perfect pitch, and can play 63 instruments. He's done a lot.
Bill has been visiting New Zealand regularly for the last 30 years and is back for the 9th time with his new show, Vaudevillian.
We approached this episode a little differently to a normal B2B recording, as you'll soon hear. Bill oozes wisdom and lived experience, so we asked him a bunch of big questions about life rather than replaying his greatest hits, and we're so stoked with the result.
Bill is thoughtful, considered, and candid with his views on life, loss, friendship, and success, and it was a privilege to have a front row seat for this one.
This episode is brought to you by TAB. Got a hunch? Download the app today and get your bet on.
And if you'd like to get one of our epic guests or us into MC or speak at your next function or event, flick us a message by going to b2bspeakers.co.nz and we'll help find you the perfect fit. Enjoy.
Bill Bailey, welcome to Between Two Beers.
Thank you.
That's a very cool thing to say.
It's not something I expected 6 years ago that we would be saying this.
This is Media Day for you, Bill.
Yeah.
And this is interview 1000 for the day, I believe.
Something like that.
The good news is this is the longest one as well.
Oh, good.
I wanted to start by asking about that. Do you enjoy these days? Does it feel like the worst part of your job?
No, actually, and I know this, you'd probably think, oh, you're just saying this, but I genuinely like these days when I'm talking about a show, when I come to a new country and I'm touring a show. And I tell you the reason, because actually, very often, and this is the case in point with this tour, is that I'm still trying to figure out what the show is about. And very often, having these conversations, I actually am then put on the spot and I have to articulate in something that sounds vaguely coherent what I'm actually talking about. And I suddenly get these moments of revelation. Oh yeah, that's what this is. And so I find it very, very helpful, actually. As part of the whole process of a show is you have to tell people about it. You have to try and encourage people to come to see a show. This is a necessary part of that whole kind of contract you have, and I genuinely enjoy it because it's fun. I like chatting to different people. We have great conversations. Sometimes the conversation goes off at a tangent. Sometimes we talk about serious stuff. Sometimes it's frivolous, but all the time it's making my brain work and articulate what I'm actually about to do, so I kind of enjoy it.
Well, we'll take credit for the success of the tour, given that this is one of your last ones, before you get underway in Invercargill.
Absolutely.
That is so cool to hear, because I think from our perspective, we knew we had you at the end of this day, and we're wondering what sort of mindset you come into it with. But we've got so many cool things to talk about, and we're so excited to sort of pick away at your wisdom that you've learned over the years, and get it all out there. But like Say said, this is the 9th tour to New Zealand.
Yeah.
Would you move here?
I've considered it on a number of occasions, and it is something that is uppermost in my mind over the last few years. And it it's got to the point where I've actually gone to look at places and look around and got quite serious about it, because it suits me very much. It's a kind of country where I could quite easily and happily live, because there's so much about it which is right in my wheelhouse. I love the natural world. I love being outside. I love, outdoorsy stuff, and this is where you can do a lot of that. And increasingly, I like isolation. I like being in remote places. Again, New Zealand will tick that box. Great people, fantastic wildlife, fascinating, sort of topography. So yeah, I have considered it. Yeah.
You've got 13 stops on this tour.
Yes.
The last one is actually in our hometown, Hamilton.
Yeah,
right.
Best to last.
And we are Hamilton ambassadors. We're Hambassadors, we call ourselves.
Oh, that's
so
nice.
we are looking forward to you finishing off and us showing you a good time in our city. But curious to know, how much research do you do on the places that you're going to before you arrive in them?
Sometimes I do a little, just so that I've got the basics, so I know where the baseline is and maybe what to sort of talk to people about. But often I find it's better not to know. It's better to just let people tell you, and not to and make a virtue of ignorance, and actually ask people questions about a place. And then people are very revealing. People are often very proud of where they live, or they'll be the first to slag it off. You know what I mean? Like that, it's that's the mindset anywhere you go in the world, And so very often I like to just let people just tell me about a place, and then very often somebody will say, no, it isn't, and then a little sort of bit of a kind of a spat will break out. It's great fun.
Well, yeah, we're very much trying to reverse the public image of Hamilton, which is a very cool place.
I think it is. Yeah. I very liked it very much. In fact, I mean, I often find, though, when I tour, not just here in New Zealand but everywhere, when I go to places, and then people will say, well, why are you going there for? And I'd like to say, why shouldn't I go there? And I remember, what was it? I think it was a few years ago now. It was a fair few years. I was doing a show here in Auckland, and I said, I've just started. I was doing it in a different order, and I said, I've just started. And then I said, I'm heading out on tour. And then somebody said, where are you going next? Well, I said, well, I'm going to Hamilton. And then there's this kind of what? This kind of murmurings of disbelief.
Oh, really?
And then it was a woman in the front row, and I said, sorry, why did you say that? And I said, no, by the way, I said to you, I'd established, I was asking people what they did, and I said, what do you do for a living? She says, she worked for the New Zealand Health Department or something. She was high up in the health department. And I said, oh, right. And I said, why shouldn't? I said, why wouldn't I go to Hamilton? And she just looked at me straight in the eye. She goes, well, it's got some of the highest rates of sexually transmitted disease. And I went, oh, okay.
Well, look, we've happily passed that on, actually, to Tairāwhiti Gisborne. So if you're looking to chase that rabbit down the hole, it's now down on the East Coast.
It's gone. All right, okay, yeah. And I said, and I didn't quite know what to make of it. And she just came out with, offered this fact up, And I went, oh, I said, you speak from experience.
Yeah, we're turning the tide on that chat.
Yeah, good. Good.
When you are performing, walking out on stage, how much of it is improvised? How much of it is kind of, the same structure in each town?
Well, most of the time, I try to have a structure. So I'd have to a framework of the show, because I like to have that as the kind of bookends of both halves of the show. So every show's pretty much has got two halves, and so I like to know how it starts and how it ends, so I know where I'm headed. But along the way, I don't mind if it goes off down some little pathways or some tangled, sort of little detours. And I like to encourage that a little bit with an audience.
I listened to an interview you did a few years ago in prep for this, and it's actually inspired our approach to this episode. So you spoke about how you used to have a more of a rigid set, a sort of a way you did things until you didn't. And you said that not conforming to a structure or the same old way was where the best stuff happened. Yeah. And we kind of have a same old way of doing things here between two beers, but that answer of yours inspired us to challenge it. So normally we research the shit out of your life and work through and engaging kind of, this is your lifestyle breakdown. Yes. Which has worked very well for us. But as we thought about you as a guest, it didn't feel right. So you've lived too much of a life to cover. So instead, we've put together kind of a thoughtful list of some big questions that we want to talk about. And we think it might lead to a higher value chat. So if you're open to it, we've got a few that we want to fire out. Right. So start off. So what does a successful year look like for you now?
Well, a year is a period of time which flies by ever more quickly. And so I would say if I was to quantify success by a different metric other than just maybe, I don't know, financial or career, I would say that it would definitely involve time with family. So I'd have to carve out some time where I spent with the family, whether we went on holiday or we spent time together just at home, or whether it was something which I love to do, and that is organise walks around Britain. And so I would say that would have to be a key part of it. Another thing would be I love to make a plan and see it through. That's one of the great pleasures of life. You make a plan, you kind of execute the plan, and it comes off and you move on. So that if I can get that to happen in a year, then that would be a mark of success, definitely. If I learn a new instrument, I would consider that to be a success.
Can I pause there for a second and try and get a genuine number on the amount of instruments you know how to play? Because I've got 163, I've got 38, I've got 64. There's a lot of conflicting information out there.
Yeah, I'd say yes, an average of those. I mean, it's difficult to quantify. I mean, somebody did say they figured out that it was, I don't know, sort of between 60 and 100, but I would say that it's difficult to really be specific, because I learned on the piano, and then I have some kind of facility with any instrument that has a keyboard. So that's already quite a few instruments. You've got lots of instruments with keyboards. And then I taught myself guitar, but I also love sort of more ancient Eastern instruments like bouzouki and lutes, mandolins, mandolas, sazes, sitterns, and these I find an affinity with as well because of the shape and the method of playing. But there's all kinds of those. I mean, there's innumerable instruments like that, all of which I've tried at some point and used in the show, and I collect them. And then people give me instruments which I've never seen before. Like there's an instrument I'm touring in this show which I'd even heard of until it arrived at a stage door of theatre, and it's a one-stringed devotional lute from the Indian subcontinent from the 1400s. Of course it is. Yeah. It's called an ektara, and I'm like already trying to figure out how to play that. So there's a whole world of instruments out there that I haven't yet encountered, I haven't learned, but I want to try and turn my hand to as many as I can in the time that I have. And so I would say, I don't know is the answer. I've recently learnt as well, another instrument I brought with me is the thing called a nyckelharpa, which is a Swedish keyed violin, and again it's probably from the 1500s. It's a beautiful instrument. It looks a bit like a mini cello. You bow it as if you were bowing a violin, but in the way you create the notes is you use these beautiful handcrafted wooden keys which press against the string and bend it to the pitch that you want. Again, it's a challenge, but it's something I've never seen before. Again, it was a gift, and so I feel an obligation to learn it
as you do.
as a sort of thank you for the gift. So, to be honest, I don't know. It's quite a lot, and there's a lot of percussion instruments I love as well. I mean, I love drumming. I taught myself the drums, and I taught myself, the percussion instruments, congas, bongos. I love all those kinds of things. I've got a little 5th century Zimbabwean thumb piano.
I thought you were playing PlayStation. I've got a PlayStation that I brought on tour as well.
A PlayStation, I'll take that. yeah, I can play that very well. And in this show as well, I've got, it's not technically an instrument, but I use it as an instrument. I've got an old typewriter that is such a brilliant percussive thing that there's a piece of music that was written for it in the 50s, and I'm going to perform that as part of the show. But then I've also we've kind of rigged up a laptop to play the sounds of a modern, office sounds. Like the sort of the piece of music was written for a typewriter, and the typewriter, it hammers away, and you get the zip of the carriage return and the ding. So we've got samples of computer sounds, like computer clicks, and then the sound of an email, whoosh, whoosh, and then a ding of a message arriving. So things like that, I love that. I try and incorporate new tech into old instruments, play old instruments in new ways, find uses for tech that perhaps is never been used before. One year I used an instrument called a tenorion. It's a Japanese instrument, and it's a square like this, and it has 2 grids. It's just buttons. It's about sort of 16 buttons there and 16 buttons there, and each button you press or you depress, and it lights up a sound and creates a pulse. And you can create these kind of electronic pulses based on shapes. And so I would get someone out of the audience to put their hand on this device, and it would take an imprint of their hand, and then the machine would then play the notes that their hand had depressed and create an individual sound print of that person's hand. And things like this, I love things like that. I just love the way that tech and can be used in you apply it with comedy and with the kind of shows I do. It takes stuff into a different direction. So things like that, learning new stuff, spending time with the family, probably doing some shows, collaborating with musicians, always trying to learn new things. I'm curious generally about the world, so...
That instrument chat was one of the great rabbit holes that we've gone down. I think 80% of those instruments I've never heard of before.
And we only did about 7 as well. There's still, depending on your note, there's about 158 to go.
But I was thinking back to the wider, like that was just a part of what a successful year looks like, right?
Yeah.
So it's the music element to it. But like we had in our notes, you used to do 300 gigs in a year.
Yeah.
So like how different does life look now to those days?
Yeah, no, very different. I mean, I try to sort of manage the time better, because then perhaps when I was doing 300 gigs or 300 plus, I was not in a relationship, wasn't a parent, I didn't have those kind of responsibilities, but now I think life is a little different. I like spending time at home with the family, and I love to be at home and cook nice food, and my dad lives next door now, and so I see a lot of him, and he's around, and we spend time together, and that to me is precious time. So that I would consider that to be a success, if that I managed to order my life in a slightly different way.
What's your relationship with your dad? Like, how has your relationship with your dad changed across your life?
Well, my dad was we lost Mum 20 years ago, and so he was always really like the quiet one in that relationship. My mum was like the life and soul. She was the one who'd cook and invite people round, and she was the party, the soul of the party. And my dad was quite happy to take a sort of backseat role. And so when she died 20 years ago, it took a long time for him to adjust to a new way of being, and he lived on his own for many years, and became quite self-contained. And I had, I would I'd go up there and see him, and we would spend time together. And I was trying to always persuade him to come to London because he lived out in the countryside. I said, "Look, Dad, you can come and live with us. No. He's quite stubborn." And I said, "Well, that's fine. I respect that. That's fine." And in recent years, he's changed. He liked the spending time with us, and he realised that he's quite elderly now. He's 93, and when you get to that grand old age, the sad truth of that is a lot of friends are no longer around, and so he felt a little isolated. And I said, "Well, look, you can always come with it and stay with us," and that's what he's done. And so now we have it's a different kind of relationship. Before it was like I would go up and see him, and we'd go out for lunch, or we'd do something, and then I'd come back to London. And now we see him every day. We go and have coffee and chat about this and that, and he comes around for his tea in the evening, and he walks the dog. He's part of the family, and I love that. I love that, and it's become we talk every day, and he's a very engaged man. He talks. He's not your average 93-year-old. We have conversations about AI, and
Really,
he's completely sort of across any sort of the latest subjects, and he's very curious about those things, and so. He's very sharp.
That's where you get it from. Then I'm assuming like growth and continuing to learn is a really important part.
I think so. Absolutely, yeah.
Because you also grew up in an intergenerational household yourself, right?
Yes,
with your grandparents. That's right. In your home. So your father's relationship with your own son?
Yeah, it's great. I catch them having conversations.
I love that.
I catch them doing it. It is. Hey. It's like, what are you guys? And you're not supposed to be. All right, then I'll let you do. And it's great. To see that. They're talking about various things and talking about tech, talking about what he's going to do, talking about his relationship, talking about his own memories, which are so precious. When recently we had VE Day celebration in the UK, which was the end of the war, effectively, in Europe, and it was the celebrations of that, and so the whole street we had bunting up, and we had celebrations, and my dad remembered. He said he remembered when it happened. I mean, he was a kid, obviously, but he remembers the lights coming back on. And he said, for most of his childhood was the war. He grew up. He was born in the 1930s, and so he was a young kid when the war started, and his childhood. So 6 years of his childhood was war. And so when he came out of that, it was a huge deal to see the lights come back on. Like the whole city had been in blackout. There'd been, rationing. And that became part of his childhood. And then suddenly it's like, no, this is what life should be like. And he remembers it so vividly. And having that actually as a sort of that almost like a living repository of memory like that is a wonderful thing.
I'm having a moment because my dad would have been 91.
Oh,
so the stories you're telling about rationing, the stories that I grew up hearing and listening to. It's such a special thing for you to still be able to hear them, and for your own son to be able to hear them as well is amazing. Dad was born in 1935. So,
was he?
So it's beautiful thing for you to share.
It is. It is a wonderful thing, and he's not. He's very sanguine about his age, and he's very pragmatic about it, and and people will say to him, what's your secret? He's always cheerful, and he's always positive, and he's always curious about the world. And he says to them, and people go, "What's your secret, Christopher?" And he goes, "Never buy green bananas." Which I love. It's like, and it's sort of sweet and funny, but also like, don't worry too much about the future. live in the moment. Get the banana and eat it now.
Because of these exact conversations, we started this business called Reflections, and it captures the stories of your parents.
Yes.
Like if they've lived these incredible lives, 'cause once they go, their stories go.
Yes.
So we go to people's homes, and I did one with a 95-year-old. We did one with an 81-year-old last week, and it's like they don't really share their stories anymore. Like how often does someone actually sit and ask them about their life and really listen to the answer and be interested in it? And it's a really incredibly like sacred and privileged and emotional time. But there's just so much, so many incredible stories that just get lost.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, like, you feel this. I talk to him, and you realise that there's what we consider to be new things happening, of a sort of echoes of events past, and like when we were going through COVID, when we go through the pandemic, and he was saying that when he was qualified as a doctor, there was a huge flu outbreak in the UK in the 50s, 1957. It was called the Hong Kong flu. Everything gets named, which was due to the fact it was a particularly virulent strain that had supposedly come from Asia. And it got dubbed the Hong Kong flu. And that was, it claimed the life of his father. So would have been my grandfather, who I never met. And he said it was, there were so many similarities, there were so many parallels, that people just not really can think, this is just flu, it's fine. And then it would sort of abate in the summertime, like the same as ours, and our generation, it sort of seemed to be over, and then the winter came back, and it came back in a second wave. He said the same thing, and he said nobody ever learns, and he was like, but it was fascinating listening to him talk about it, and his, as you say, he's lived a long life.
This is awesome. I want to move to the next question. Is from my perspective of Bill Bailey, is that you must just get asked to do everything. Like there's endless opportunities. Everyone wants you. But I wanted to know, how do you decide what projects to pursue? And I sort of categorized it into like fun, growth, or mastery, and maybe that's not right. But like, is it there to be a hell yes for someone to approach you and to do something? How do you choose where do you put your time and energy these days?
Well, no, that's a good question, because I'm acutely aware that time is finite, and that you have to be quite selective. I think you have to be sure of a project in some ways, but then there's another part of me which I love adventure. I love something that's new, and so I'm kind of torn between projects which I think perhaps I ought to do, and projects which I think that sounds great. I'd love to do that, even though it's an untested, unknown thing with people I haven't met before. And then it's like, Bill, would you want to, would you like to go to Alaska and chart the arrival of the very first explorer?
Bring those instruments.
Like who arrived in Alaska. And it's like, yeah, and then it'd be like, do you want to do a show where you take people out into the wilderness and you still educate them about birds and about the stars and all the things that I love? And exactly. And then there's a lot of things which I know just do you
want to come on? I'm a celebrity, get me out of here. No.
No, exactly. No, because what have those poor cockroaches done to deserve the torment of being shoved in a booth with these people? So, no, exactly no. I mean, those are the things that I guess are now off the table, and it's things that I really want to learn about, a new place, travel to a country I've not been before, learning a skill, being in the outdoors is so important to me. I think anything that involves that it gets my antenna twitching.
And what about, do you have rules for like quitting a project? Like, is there times when you realise this is actually a mistake and you walk away, or do you see it to the end?
I mean, I always commit to something 100%, and I will always see it through to the end, even if I have misgivings about it. But then usually what I find in my experience is if you throw yourself into something with complete commitment, it's usually worth doing. And whatever comes out of it, the fact that you've given that amount of commitment to something confers the kind of legitimacy on it anyway. It's like, well, I don't know, I wasn't sure about this, but hell, I threw myself into it and I got something out of it. This wouldn't have happened if I hadn't done it. So I always think there's value in that. I don't think what I would be against, what I try not to do is kind of get into something where you think I'm just going to half do it, because I would hate that. I'd want to throw myself into something wholeheartedly, and that's where you get the benefit from it.
Is that why you left university after 36 hours?
Yes, probably. That's it. I thought, I'm not getting anything out of this.
It's a good decision, quick decision.
It was very much a quick decision. I thought, yeah, this just, I don't know, I'm not feeling it. And I think what it was I was asked a question about meter, in poetry and in verse, particularly Shakespearean verse. And I thought, I did this years ago.
Because you were a good student at high school, right?
I was a good student, yes. I got my mind right, boss. and is
that Green Mile? Sorry, there's one weird cultural reference.
No, it's Cool and Luke.
Yeah, sorry.
And and I'd I'm Dick, boss. I'm eating eggs, boss. And I just thought, this was perhaps what I wanted to do. I was set on a kind of a path of academia, and the teachers always thought that, and they, and then I don't know. It seemed like a backward step. Weirdly, it wasn't what I thought it would be. I'll put it that way. And I wasn't getting challenged the way I thought I was going to get challenged. I didn't think this was a challenging enough course. Perhaps it was the wrong course. It was just the wrong time. And I just thought I need to do something else a bit more demanding, that's going to be, I'm going to learn a bit more from. And then I threw myself into a drama project, which led to me performing, and then the performing led to me wanting to do comedy, and then, that was it. Once I got a taste of that, I realized that this sort of, the lectures and the learning about these things wasn't for me. I wanted to explore this other aspect of life before I got back to that. I often think, sometimes, if I very rarely regret anything, but in some moments of reflection, I sometimes think, perhaps I should have pursued that, as you say, and got something out of it, and pursued an academic career, or even finished the course. That galls me. It irks me that I didn't do that. I was too much in a hurry. I was a young man in a hurry. I was, 18, leaving home. I was in London. It was like, yeah, come on. I wanted everything to happen straight away, and I didn't have the patience to see it through. And that's one of the things that perhaps I've learned with age, is patience.
That leads quite nicely into the next question. The question is, do you have a favourite failure? But I've got a kind of a note here that may be it. So 1994, after performing the show Rock at the Edinburgh Festival.
Edinburgh? Who's had a long day?
It's been a long day. Edinburgh with Sean Locke.
It's a giant bird floating off the coast of Scotland.
So my notes read that as a poor turnout, including one night where the only audience member was comedian Dominic Holland.
Yes.
And it led to you contemplating a telesales job.
Yes. Well, that's it. I mean, it was... It was. I mean, actually, I've often thought about filming that as a drama. Just that whole year, because we'd written this show, myself and Sean Locke, about a sort of down at heel rock star whose fortunes have taken a bit of a dive, and he wants to try and make a comeback. And he's kind of out of time. He's like one of these old sort of 80s rockers, and music's moved on, and these audiences moved on, and he's got his faithful roadie who's stuck with him throughout thick and thin. And so they put this show together, and it's about reminiscences of the crazy times and some songs, and of course the songs are all these bloated prog rock song nonsense, and we thought it was funny, obviously, because we thought it was great, and but it wasn't a sort of obvious stand-up show. It wasn't like like a lot of shows in the festival in Edinburgh are. A lot with comics, there'll be a bill. There'll be like a mixed bill of comics, and it's pretty standard for audiences to sort of figure out what this is. But nobody knew what this was, and we probably didn't sell it very well. And anyway, you're right. We'd struggled to get an audience, and one night I remember Sean was the roadie, and he would go out before I would be backstage, and I was a West Country rocker, Bill Best. And I would be like, we'd have this conversation, and he'd go, right, he goes, okay, he goes, and a bit of health and safety, so he did a bit of banter with the audience. He'd go, right, health and safety, he goes, right, come at me, and I'll stop you, I've got all the skills, come at me. And then he would do this thing, and he goes, right, it's safe, Bill, you can come out now. And then one was, I was sat backstage, and I heard Sean, he went out and he went, right, he goes, okay, everyone, he goes, come, health and shit, fuck's sake. And then he went, you can come out, Bill. And I thought he was in character, so I'm in backstage going, what's that, Big Sean? Come out now. No, Bill, no, it's just Sean. It's Sean talking now, just come out. And he goes, what do you mean come out now? You want me to come out? And there was a bit of that, and he goes, no, just fucking come out. He goes, there's no one here. There's no one here. And I sort of went, what? And so I sort of sheepishly came out and went, what do you mean, Big Sean? There's no. And then I looked out and there was no one. I went, oh, I see what you mean. And then it was only then we noticed there was one person in the audience. Oh, and it was a friend of ours, a comedian called Dominic Holland. Fun fact, his son is Tom Holland of Spider-Man fame. Anyway, so Dom, he's there and so we both clock him because he's right at the back, because that's where Sean hadn't seen him in the first instance. And we just stood there looking at each other like, oh, for God's sake. And then Dominic he goes, go on, lads. He goes, just relax, lads. Enjoy yourselves. And we were like, Dom, we are not doing the show for you. That's just weird. I said, we'll take you to the bar and run you through the highlights, but we're not going to stand here and do the show. Anyway, it was actually one of the shows we were really, really down because obviously we'd put a lot of effort into this. I had a trolley made for this show. I had a rock star stretch trolley made. Like because when he goes to the shops, he can't have a normal trolley. He has to have a rock star shopping trolley, which had an aerial and it smoked glass. I mean, it was an amazing piece of kit, this prop. We had a friend of ours who cut two trolleys together and soldered them together into a long 6-foot shopping trolley. It was a thing of wonder. Anyway, we were really down. We were no audiences, a handful, a few. We were struggling away, and then we got this review, which was the most fantastic review I think we've ever had. It was just absolutely glowing. It was from one of the big papers. I can't remember what it was, but it said, "This is I've never laughed so much. This is the funniest show. You have to go and see it." And then we started to get an audience, and then it started to make sense. And I think of that very, very fondly. It's one of my fondest moments was hanging out with Sean that year when we were doing that show, and we threw everything into that, and it was really, really funny. We wrote a song together called "The Leg of Time," which came out of that show, and it was really what the whole spirit of that time was about.
I did one of those lists. I turned 40 this year. I did one of those 40 things I've learned at 40. And one of them was Sean Locke may have been the funniest man to have ever lived. And I wondered if you could just tell us a little bit more about, best friends with him for so long. Like, what was it about the way he saw the world, or what was it that made him so brilliant in your eyes?
I think that he had this ability to just turn a story on its head, take a subject and go, you'd sort of go with him, where the hell are we going with this? And then he would sort of flip it around and turn it into something else completely unexpected. And he had a kind of manic energy which he invested in every one of these routines, which drew you along. You sort of, in spite of yourself, you got carried along with this mad. Where's he going with what? Where's he going with this? Oh well, I'm in for it, you know. And I saw him take audiences with him on these mad journeys, you know. He used to do this routine. He said, "Have you ever had the problem with the cheap forks?" Right, straight away, everyone's going, "What? What do you mean? What do you mean the cheap forks?" He goes, "You know, the cheap forks. Have you had the problem with the cheap forks from Poland? The cheap Polish forks?" Everyone's going, What are you talking about?" And he goes, "You know," "when you're making love with someone from behind." They're a bit sweaty and you can't get a grip on them, you just stick 2 forks in, but the cheap ones, they just bend." And everyone's going, What? And then he would just be off on some other tangent. And, you know, and when I first saw Sean, we were both on the same bill and we just hit it off straight away, you know, and that was it. We were friends from that night onwards. And we would. I think he was a brilliant writer as well. You know, he wrote this wonderful sitcom, 15 Stories High, which tragically was he only made 2 series. And I think Sean was really quite sort of, you know, he was sort of quite taken aback when it didn't continue, because he really thought that was it. You know, that was the kind of where he wanted to be. He wanted to write comedy. That was his real aim. And when that didn't work out, I think it really did sort of, you know, knock him back a little bit. And then he found this amazing gig in 15 Countdown, Cat Says Countdown, where he was able to really shine as a brilliant comic. And that's what sort of cemented his relationship with the public, I think. But really, that was those early days when we were knocked around in a car together, going up and down the country, doing gigs, thinking up mad ideas, was some of my fondest memories, not just of hanging out with Sean, but just of those early days of learning the business of comedy.
I imagine, I mean, there's so much to miss about him, but one part which I think might be unique is that it must be hard to find people whose opinion you trust when you're trying out new ideas or writing new bits. But I imagine he would be like such a great sounding board, right? Yeah,
totally, absolutely, he was. And you know, it's difficult. You're right. You know, you want to find a trusted confidant with comedy, because it's sometimes quite personal. You know, it's quite you feel a bit self-conscious about it sometimes. You know, you feel a bit vulnerable. Like, is it people going to find? Are they going to like it? Or are they not going to like it? You know, my wife's quite a very good critic. You know, she's very, very harsh, which is great. And my son's actually, he loves comedy as well, so he's very good. But with Sean, it's like if you do it, if you're a comic, only comics understand certain things, because you have these mad thoughts as comics, and sometimes they strike you at odd times of the day. Like I'll be on tour, and I'd be in a hotel room on my own somewhere, you know, just some weird travelogue. You know what I mean? Like go through the mini bar and just like on my own in a hotel room, just in my own head, in my own thoughts, going, what am I doing with my life? I've just told a lot of nonsense to some strangers. Is this what life is? And now I'm on my own. Like what? And I've just told them about the fact that I had a concrete pig once in my in my garden, and that's one of the perks of the job. And you know, and no one understands that kind of the madness, this sort of weird thought spiral you go down, except other comics, especially when somebody that you're very close to. And so I knew that I could always phone him and tell him those thoughts, even if it was like 2 a.m. And I'd say, I'm having these mad thoughts. And he'd say, look, I know exactly. I've had the mad thoughts. Doesn't matter. We all have it. It's fine. And that was an enormous amount of comfort having that person on the end of the phone, someone who's been there, gone through it, knows what the way that, you know, a comic's mind works.
Have you been able to find someone to step into those big shoes of Sean's since his passing in 2021?
In 21, no, not really, no. I mean, it was a huge gap in my life. It's a huge hole. And it's difficult, really, because we were so close for so long, and I hadn't really thought about what would happen when he wasn't there. And now he hasn't been around for the last few years. And there's no one really quite like that in my life as another comic. I mean, I've got my wife, a son, they're very good. They're very savvy in terms of comedy, but there's not quite the same, I don't have quite the same relationship with other friends as I did with Sean, where we were we'd been to the, you know, into all kinds of crazy situations where you feel that you have ultimate trust in someone, you know. So like we'd been through the fire, you know, sort of like we've been scarred by it, and we've come out the other side, and we're like we're still here. And I miss him terribly, you know. He was a huge part of my life. He was a confidant as well as being a fellow comic. Very, very funny man, brilliantly funny mind he had. And I miss our time we spent together, because we spent a lot of time outside of comedy. We would go on walks. We would walk for miles and miles and miles all around Britain. We walked all around the world, around Europe. And we would talk about every subject you could think of. You know, he thought very deeply about things. He thought about politics. He thought about history, about philosophy. He enrolled in a philosophy course in the last year of his life. He wanted to keep learning. He wanted to keep his mind active, and we'd have long conversations about philosophy, about what happens to you, what happens to us, you know, after we die, what he believed in, what he didn't believe in. We talked about history. We talked about daft stuff. We laughed like drains. And that is something that was very special to me, and you know, I miss him very much for that as much as anything else. That companionship.
And our audience is male, predominantly male, and
yeah,
you know, there will be people listening that have lost a close mate, a best friend. There will be some that unfortunately will lose one soon. Yeah. So how do you keep that friendship or those memories alive?
Well, I think the thing is you need to, you know, you say their name, you know, you speak their name, you talk to friends about them, you reminisce about them. And I actually, I mean, in a sort of, I suppose, a kind of desire to keep his name alive, and also for his family and for his kids, I persuaded Channel 4, which was the station that broadcast a lot of Sean's comedy, to instigate the Sean Locke Comedy Award, which was what they've done. And so it's an award for young comics, a financial award, a cash prize, plus access to TV writers, and to give them experience of how to write comedy, how to work in the comedy industry, how to find employment other than doing stand-up. And it's to those comics who are sort of different, who are unique, who are utterly original, as Sean was. So that's, I mean, I felt I needed to do that, and that's an ongoing thing, and it gathers pace every year. But actually, it's just about saying someone's name, about getting together with friends and talking about them. That's a great way to keep someone's memory alive. I organise these walks, these long walks across Britain, and we do them in Sean's memory, and we get his family and his friends will come on the walks, and we'll talk about him, and you know, it's quite sad sometimes. You know, it's sad because, you know, often triggers memories people of loss, and we talk about that, and but also it's funny because, you know, he was a funny man. You know, that energy doesn't just dissipate when somebody goes. Their energy just carries on. And I often, I'd sort of, I tell you this thing. I had a dream. He sometimes appears in a dream, and this happened the other week, and it was a lovely thing. I was walking in the countryside, and Sean was ahead of me, and I knew exactly it was him because he had this sort of strange, like his shoulders were up.
I can see, yeah.
His shoulders were up, and he's walking in this slightly annoyed way that he always used to walk. And he had a hat on. He's kind of like his cap down, pulled down like that, and he's walking along like that. And I said, Sean, like that, and he didn't turn round. And I was like, slightly in the dream, I'm slightly annoyed at him, like, I'm your mate, And I was hurrying to catch up, and I went, Sean, like that, and he still didn't turn around. He just kept going like that, and then he slowed down, and allowed me to catch up. And in the dream, he just held his hand out to me, and I took his hand like that, and we were holding hands. It was kind of like two kids. It was very sweet. And then we just carried on walking. And from that, he just wanted me to know that he's okay. That don't worry. And that sort of, I found that quite reassuring.
Yeah, that's powerful. There's something about walking. You've mentioned it a few times. I think it's something you appreciate more as you get older.
Yeah.
Right? Like the beauty of going for a walk and facing the same direction, and it's just something that you wouldn't really consider up until, I don't know, maybe the age of about 35, and you think, we'll go for a walk.
Yeah.
That sounds good. We'll go for a walk. We'll go for a walk in the morning with your wife, and it's something really special about it.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. I'm a big advocate of it for those reasons that you outlined there. You're sort of facing the same direction. You don't have the same intensity as a conversation, like where you're looking right at someone in a pub, say, which is fine, but blokes going to pubs is a different thing. It ends up with it's not quite the same. When you're walking, when you have a purpose, you have a direction that you're going in. It somehow takes away that sort of breaks the tension of a real intense one-on-one conversation, and you can talk about anything, and it unlocks conversations with blokes, I think, in a way that's like no other.
You did the concept of perfect pub walks, which is a brilliant idea brought to life on screen, I guess, which empowers other men to do the same without the TV cameras and without the microphones.
Yeah, that's right. I think so. I'd hope so. I think that's it. I mean, I was amazed, by the reaction to that. I had so many people come up to me, people from all walks of life, sort of people who were from every strata of society, sort of surgeons, judges. Some guy who was the cleaner on a train, the guy that empties the bins, came up to me and said, that was so great, that program. It said so much about, it's about blokes. We need to talk to each other more. We need to engage in conversation more. And walking is a way to do that. And people have said to me, they've started little walking groups as a result, just so that, for that reason, to get people talking, because it's so important. We don't have time really a lot of the time to talk to people, and the phone can do so much. But being out in nature, which is what we and Sean used to do all the time, was the kind of you gain so much else from it that perhaps you don't get from a phone conversation. And I encourage people to do it all the time. And you're right, it has a great value.
And maybe I'm drawing too much of a bow, but you used to do that with your father? When you grew up on the farm, you'd get out and do the walks? And
we'd go out walking together. He had a dog, so we'd take the dogs out, we'd walk and chat about this and that, everything under the sun.
I want to ask you a few questions about success and what it means to you now. The question I had was like, how would 20-year-old Bill describe success, and what would he get wrong? So I wanted to know what it means to be successful now. Well,
I would think that I would probably have some idealized view of what success was, gainful employment, regular money, some reliable source of income, perhaps something that you could plan for. But you know, one of the things that I've realised over the years, and that is that I had an enormous amount of luck when I was that age, and that was that I had that kind of that impetuosity of youth. Definitely, I had that, and a certain recklessness and an impatience. But also, I was so lucky to have a grain of insight, which I don't know from where that came, but it was enough to know what was the right thing to do. And I was guided by my instinct, which was to, you know, to just throw myself into performance, into writing, into music, into all of these things which I loved, and I just followed my heart, soul, followed my, you know, the kind of the gut, if you will. I followed those instincts, and I allowed myself to be taken along with them. And I perhaps thought that, you know, I don't know, success was money and fame and all those things. But actually, there was a tiny part of me, even then, that knew that actually what's important is satisfying work, is being able to be satisfied by what you do, is to love what you do and to live in that moment and not to get too hung up on what you've done or where you're headed, because those two will just be always, they're just blind alleys. You don't want to get involved with that. You don't want to compare yourself to others because everyone's got their thing. You just do what you're going to do, what you feel is right. And that confers a kind of legitimacy on it. Just that. There's this brilliant line in, I think it's one of the sort of the dictums of Kant, you know, the moral imperative, that the purity of intention confers morality on the deed. And that's not quite what I mean here, but I think you can draw a parallel with that. If you go into something with the right intentions, like, I love this is something I want to do, then, you know, it will guide you on the right path. And I think I had a deal of it. I had enough of that, even as a young man, to take me to where I am now.
Bill, this has been such a privilege sharing this amount of time with you. I know how busy you are. Can you tell us about the tour? Tell us everything they need to know. The listeners will, this will be released. There'll be heaps of tickets to, I'm hoping, they're not sold out yet?
No. When this is, the tour is, I think it starts on Wednesday in Queenstown, and it goes all around New Zealand. Lots of places, mainly places I've been before. Oamaru is a new place, I think. But yeah, I mean, the show's called Vaudevillian. It's about really celebrating all of those things, about music and about instruments, interesting instruments, audience participation, stories, anecdotes, jokes, all of the things that are the essence of what vaudeville was, which was the preeminent entertainment of the world before radio, TV, or any of those things. It was live entertainment, and it's really sort of celebrating those elements. So it's kind of really what I've been doing for the last 30 years. And then I suddenly realised, oh yeah, wait a minute, this is exactly what this is. This is vaudeville. I should lean into this more. And hence the name Vaudevillian. I've finally, after all these years and all these tours and all these experiences, arrived at who I actually am, and that is Vaudevillian. So it's a celebration of that.
Which is wonderful in an era where I guess everything's moving towards screens, to encourage people actually to get out and to interact in real time, in real life with people.
Yeah, I definitely think that. I think it's very important, and I think that in a time when, as you say, when most business models require you to stay at home, order food in, watch a thing on a screen, getting out and being part of an audience is so important. It's such an important thing, and I really would love people to come out and celebrate that. It's a wonderful experience. It's a great experience, a shared experience. It's such a beautiful thing.
There's 13 locations across New Zealand. If you're listening to this, click on the show notes or the YouTube description. We're going to have them all there. Make sure you go and see Bill.
And we'll be there in Hamilton.
No. All right, we got about 10 minutes, and I got 4 big questions.
Okay,
so
go.
I want to get to them all.
All right.
Parenting advice. Do you have a best piece of parenting advice? Do you have?
Well, I would say that you should think about letting go earlier than you think. I think that some people like to hang on and to the fact that you're the sort of, as a parent, you're the be all and end all for a kid. But kids need to learn their independence, and they need to learn who they are, and they need to figure that out. And the sooner the better. And I think that what I would say that, of everybody humbly, what I would have passed on is a sense of independence and of being self-reliant. It's so important, So, and I try to make a conscious point of it with my son, for that very reason. Because, it's a tough world out there. You've got to be prepared, and there's only, you can support. Of course, you can. You can love your kids as much as you can, and you can support them in any way you like. But you have to let go. You have to let them find their own way. And that was something which I think I made a conscious effort for. And I always remember it when I used to take him camping a lot. Me and my wife would go with him, or I would just take him on my own. From a very, very early age, I've got very, very fond memories of going camping, teaching him how to put up a tent, teaching him how to camp, how to get a fire going, how to cook food, how to prepare it, how to keep the camp tidy, all those things. I sort of drilled it into him just because I loved that. That's something I love doing. And I remember he went on a school trip, and he said, some of these kids had never been away from home. They'd never spent a night outside of their own home, and he'd been staying on other people's houses. When he was 4, we were on a remote Indonesian island, and we'd made friends with this fisherman and his wife, and they said, to our boys, would you like to come and stay with us on this other island? And we said, do you want to go? And he goes, yeah. And so he went on another island. He went to go on a fishing boat to this other island, and he stayed with this fishing family in this remote Indonesian island out in the Moluccas in eastern Indonesia. And the next day he came back, and he'd combed his hair and put a new t-shirt on, and he looked fantastic. And he said that was quite an experience. Yeah. And he'd sort of got so much from that. He learned so much from that, more than you could imagine. He learned about other cultures, about people, about the way people live. And so when he went on this camping trip at school, he was like Mowgli. He was like Jungle Kid. These other kids had never put up a tent before, and he's going, "Now you do this," and then he was out, and I loved that, and it gave me so much pleasure. I felt a surge of pride that he was able to do that, and I'd say that would be my humble tip for kids. Yeah.
You met your wife Christina in 1987. What is the secret to a long-lasting relationship?
We met in a bar in Edinburgh, and I'd just done a gig, and Chris was at the gig, and she went up the stairs, and I was going back down the stairs. We met on the stairs, and she said, "You're funny." And I said, "Thanks." I said, "Nice coat." She was wearing this really cool brocade coat. Anyway, we just actually recreated it 2 weeks ago. We went to the very same bar and we recreated the moment. I'll show you in a minute, but when we met, I hung out with her for the rest of the night, and she was with a group of friends, and then I got separated from my friends, and I said, I don't know what, and she goes, oh, sorry, you can come and crash at ours. So I crashed on the sofa at her flat, and the next day, woke up and she made me a cup of tea and some cheese on toast, which I thought was brilliant. And no one had ever made me cheese on toast for breakfast. It's still a thing between us. And anyway, and I sent her some flowers, and I said, oh, thanks for putting me up. And then this was before mobile phones, and I left her my address, and so she wrote to me saying thank you for the flowers, and I wrote back the following week to say, oh, I had a great time, and then for a year we kept up correspondence by letter. I mean, it's the most absurdly, quaintly romantic thing. so yeah, Jane Austen. Yeah, it is. There was no phones, there was no text, no WhatsApp, no Zooms, nothing. It was just letters. I'd write one in a month, and then she'd write one back. I've still got them somewhere. It was a very sort of gentle romance in a way. And tell me about your day, what you're getting up to. And when you're writing, like writing is such a lost art. Cursive writing, you have to think a bit more about what you're going to say. And so you have to order your thoughts better, I think. And anyway, I would say that has a big part to play. We got to know each other very well in that year. And then after a year of corresponding via letter, she came down to London. And then that year she moved in with me onto my houseboat.
Write letters and buy a houseboat.
Those are my key messages for a long romance.
All right, and last one. What's your best piece of life advice?
Don't dwell on the past or think too much about the future. Just live in the moment and, live in the present. The past is done, the future will look after itself. And that's really stood me in good stead.
Don't buy green bananas.
Don't buy green bananas. That's what my dad said. He's right.
Just last one. This has been such a cool chat. Like I really, really just want to say how cool it's been to sit with you. Shay's got a big outro planned.
You always do. I don't have a big outro, but I do echo what Stephen said. It's been a real privilege to do something different from our side, and to, rather than stick to the rigid method that we've come to be used to actually be a little bit more in the conversation and present in the conversation. And the wisdom that you've been able to share with us reinforces things, I think, I'll speak on your behalf, that we've already started to implement into our own lives, but also introduce new ones. And it's a beautiful thing, and I encourage everybody to get out and to engage with you during the shows, because I know you like a little bit of audience participation.
Oh yeah, oh yes, and not too much.
but it has been for all of your work. There's a storytelling theme which runs through what you do, and it speaks very, very deeply to us and what we do as well.
Yeah. Oh, thanks, guys.
Thanks so much, Bill.